Jake Morrison walked into the great hall of the Galactic Council one last time. His black shoes made small sounds on the metal floor. Around him sat hundreds of alien beings from across the galaxy. Some looked like giant crystals that made musical sounds when they moved. Others were huge and covered in thick fur. A few seemed to be made of pure light that shifted and changed color. Jake had been Earth's top diplomat for 40 years. He knew every corner of this massive building. He knew which aliens liked to argue and which ones stayed quiet. He knew where to get the best coffee and which bathrooms had doors big enough for humans. Today, all of that knowledge would become useless. The hall grew quiet as Jake reached the center platform. Chancellor Vex High, a tall blue creature with 4 arms, gestured for him to speak. The Chancellor had always been polite to Jake, but never really listened to human ideas. Jake pulled out a single sheet of paper. No fancy display screens or holographic presentations. Just plain white paper with black text. "Members of the Galactic Council," Jake said in a clear voice. "After 300 years of membership, humanity formally withdraws from the Council. This withdrawal takes effect immediately. We thank you for the years of cooperation," the silence stretched out like a held breath. A Zephyrian in the front row made a confused chiming sound. One of the giant Kronar delegates started to growl low in his throat. Even the ancient ethereals, who almost never showed emotion, seemed shocked. Chancellor Vex High stood up slowly. His 4 arms moved in what humans had learned was a sign of concern. "Ambassador Morrison, surely this is too fast. The recent trade, problems can be fixed. We can talk about this." Jake shook his head. "The decision is final. Earth wishes the Council well in all future matters." What the Council members did not know was that this moment had been planned for 20 years. While Jake stood in the hall delivering humanity's goodbye, thousands of human ships were already moving through space. Every human colony was getting ready to disappear. Every trade route was being changed. Every piece of information that Earth had shared with the Council was being erased or moved. Dr. Lisa Parker sat in a hidden facility on Mars, watching screens that showed human movements across the galaxy. She had spent 15 years preparing for this day. Her job was to make sure every human settlement could survive on its own. She had built backup systems for everything: food production, power generation, defense networks, communication systems. Humans would not need the Council for anything. Admiral Carl Hayes commanded the evacuation from his ship near Jupiter. He had been moving human military assets for months. Ships that the Council thought were on routine patrols were actually heading to new locations far from Council space. Weapons and supplies that aliens thought were stored in known human bases had been quietly moved to secret locations. Carl had fought in 3 wars for the Council. He had lost friends defending alien worlds from pirates and invaders. But every time humans asked for better weapons or permission to build stronger defenses, the Council said no. They said humans were too young, too aggressive, too dangerous to be trusted with real military power. Now Carl was taking that military power away from them completely. Back in the Council hall, Jake folded his paper and put it in his pocket. "Humanity will be closing all embassies and trade offices within 48 hours. All current contracts and agreements are void as of today." A delegate from the Meridian Collective jumped up. Her purple skin had turned dark with worry. "Ambassador Morrison, our shipping contracts with human companies are worth billions of credits. You cannot just cancel them." "We can, and we are," Jake said calmly. "Read the fine print. All contracts include a clause for immediate termination in case of political withdrawal." Another alien stood up. This one looked like a walking tree with too many eyes. "The humans run most of our cargo ships between the outer rim worlds. Without them, how will we move supplies?" Jake turned to look at the tree alien. That is no longer humanity's concern. The questions kept coming, but Jake had heard enough. He had spent 40 years listening to aliens explain why human ideas were wrong, why human expansion should be limited, why human technology was not good enough to share. He had watched the Council take human innovations and give credit to other species. He had seen human proposals voted down again and again, usually without even being read. As Jake walked toward the exit, Chancellor HFY called out one more time. "Ambassador Morrison, please reconsider. The Council needs human participation. Your people are valuable members." Jake stopped and turned around one last time. "Chancellor, we were never members. We were workers. There is a difference." With those words, Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council forever. Behind him, the hall erupted in confused voices and worried chatter. Aliens who had ignored humans for centuries were suddenly very interested in talking to them. But it was too late for talking. Dr. Parker checked her screens one more time. Every human facility was ready. Every ship was in position. Every colony had enough supplies to last for years without Council support. Admiral Hayes sent out the final signal. In response, human fleets across the galaxy began to move. They did not head toward Council space. They moved in the opposite direction, toward empty systems and unexplored regions where the Council had never bothered to go. Within 6 hours of Jake's announcement, humanity had vanished from known space. The Council was left sitting in their great hall, wondering what had just happened and what they were going to do about it. 6 months had passed since the humans left. The Great Council Hall felt different now. Smaller somehow, even though it was the same size it had always been. The empty chair where Jake Morrison used to sit seemed to draw attention like a black hole. Threxnall stared at the stack of reports on his desk. As the Council's economic advisor, he had to track trade and money flows across the galaxy. The numbers he was seeing made no sense. Trade between the Outer Rim worlds had dropped by 60%. Shipping costs had gone up by 300%. Cargo ships that used to make the journey from the core worlds to the frontier in 2 weeks were now taking 2 months. Some routes had stopped working completely. Threxnall called his assistant Quix into the office. The young Dalarian slithered in on his tentacles carrying another stack of bad news. "Sir, I have the shipping reports you asked for," Quix said. His voice sounded worried. "Tell me," Threxnall said, though he was not sure he wanted to hear it. Human shipping companies handled cargo for 412 different species. They operated the main routes between all major sectors. They also ran the fuel stations and repair depots that other ships needed for long trips. Threxnall felt something cold in his stomach. "What about the logistics software, the programs that plan shipping routes?" "All human-made, sir. The program stopped getting updates the day the humans left. They are starting to fail. Some routes are sending ships to empty space because the navigation data is wrong. On the frontier worlds, things were much worse. Commander Steve Collins had been in charge of the Fringe World's defense network. For 20 years, he had kept pirates and raiders away from vulnerable colonies. His ships moved fast and hit hard. Pirates learned to avoid systems where humans were on patrol. Now Steve was gone, and the pirates knew it. Captain Amy Foster had run the rapid response team that answered distress calls from ships under attack. Her squadron could reach any point, in 3 sectors within 4 hours. Merchant captains used to sleep easy, knowing Amy and her fighters were watching over them. Now those merchant ships were disappearing. Distress calls went unanswered. Pirates were getting bold, attacking convoys that would have been safe a year ago. The Vorthan Republic was learning this lesson the hard way. Ambassador Kreltos had voted against human expansion proposals for 30 years. He had argued that humans were too aggressive, too quick to use violence. He had pushed for laws that limited human military growth. Now Vorthan colonies on the Rim were under attack, and there were no human rescue fleets to call. Kreltos sent message after message to Earth, begging for help. All of them came back, marked Address Unknown. Dr. Marcus Webb had been running a research station in the neutral zone. His work focused on diseases that affected different alien species. Marcus was an expert on how human medicine could help non-human patients. His station had been the main source of medical supplies for dozens of worlds. When Marcus left, he took all his research with him. The medical replicators that made his treatments stopped working. The formulas for his medicines were locked behind, human encryption that no one else could break. The thermal plague hit the Caldrus system 3 months after Marcus disappeared. It was a disease that attacked silicon-based life forms. Marcus had developed a treatment for it 5 years earlier. Without his medicine, the plague spread to 6 different worlds. Millions of beings got sick. Thousands died. The Council's medical team tried to recreate Marcus's treatment, but they did not understand how human medicine worked. Their attempts failed. The plague kept spreading. Dr. Nelshaw led a team to examine the abandoned human facilities. What she found confused and worried her. The humans had not just packed up and left. They had carefully removed every piece of advanced technology. They had wiped all computer systems clean. They had even taken the quantum processors that ran their artificial intelligence systems. It was planned, Nelshaw reported to the Council. This evacuation was prepared for years, maybe decades. They left nothing behind that could help us understand their technology. But the most disturbing discovery came from the intelligence files that the humans had accidentally left behind on an old computer. The files showed that humans had been watching and studying every Council species for generations. They knew military, strengths and weaknesses. They had detailed maps of trade routes and economic systems. They understood alien politics better than the aliens themselves. They were gathering intelligence the whole time, Chancellor HFY said when he read Nelshaw's report. We thought they were the junior species learning from us, but they were studying us like lab specimens. The translation problem was getting worse every day. Humans had provided translation services for almost every council meeting for 200 years. Human linguists understood alien languages better than most natives. Human computers could translate between species that had never been able to talk to each other directly. Now those translation programs were failing. Council meetings that used to run smoothly were becoming confused messes. Species that had worked together for centuries were having trouble understanding each other. The Zephyrian delegate tried to explain a trade proposal to the Thermal Assembly, but without human translators, the Thermals thought the Zephyrians were declaring war. It took 3 days to clear up the misunderstanding. Economic advisor Threxnell looked at his final report with growing horror. The galactic economy was not just declining, it was collapsing. Trade routes that had operated for centuries were shutting down. Colonies that had depended on human logistics were running out of basic supplies. The humans had not just been participants in galactic civilization, they had been the foundation holding it together, and now that foundation was gone. Threxnell's hands shook as he prepared his presentation for the emergency council session. He had to tell 400 different species that their economic system was broken. He had to explain that the humans they had taken for granted were actually the most important species in the galaxy. He had to admit that the Council had made the biggest mistake in galactic history. As Threxnell walked toward the Council chamber, he could not stop thinking about something Jake Morrison had said in his final speech. The humans were not members. They were workers. Now there was no one left to do the work. Admiral Zixathara commanded the largest search fleet in galactic history. 200 ships from 16 different species spread out across what used to be human space. Their mission was simple: find the humans and bring them back. The Admiral expected to find human colonies trying to hide from Council forces. She expected to find desperate human ships running low on supplies. She expected to find a species that had made a mistake and wanted to come home. What she found instead was nothing. The first stop was Alpha Centauri, one of humanity's oldest colonies. The fleet sensors detected the usual signs of civilization from far away: power sources, communication signals, the heat patterns of a living city. But when the ships got closer, they found empty buildings and silent streets. Admiral Zixathara led the landing party herself. The human city looked like everyone had just stepped out for lunch. Cars sat in parking spaces. Food was still fresh in refrigerators. Computers were still running, displaying news feeds and weather reports for a population that was no longer there. "There are no signs of struggle," reported Commander Velna, the fleet's investigation specialist. "No damage to buildings, no emergency. Broadcasts, no distress signals. They just left." The Admiral walked through empty schools where children's artwork still hung on the walls. She saw houses with toys scattered in yards and gardens that were still being watered by automatic systems. It was like walking through a ghost town where the ghosts had been very tidy before they disappeared. Dr. Nelshaw's science team found something even more disturbing. The humans had taken almost nothing with them. Clothes still hung in closets. Personal photos sat on tables. But every piece of advanced technology was gone. Every computer hard drive had been wiped clean. Every research facility had been stripped of equipment. "They took only what they needed to survive," Nelshaw reported. "Everything else was left behind in perfect condition. This was not a panic evacuation. This was a planned relocation." The search fleet moved on to Earth itself. The home world of humanity should have answers. What they found there made the Admiral's blood run cold. Earth was not empty. Earth was maintained. The cities were clean and in perfect repair. The power grids were running smoothly. The weather control systems were working normally. Automated systems kept everything functioning as if 8 billion humans were still living there. But there were no humans anywhere. Admiral Zixathara stood in the empty United Nations building in New York. The great assembly hall where human diplomats had once debated policy was silent. But the lights were on, the air conditioning was running, and fresh flowers sat in vases on the speaker's podium. "Someone is maintaining this place," she said to her officers. But who? The answer came from Dr. Nelshaw's investigation of human computer systems. The humans had left behind a vast network of artificial intelligence programs. These AIs were keeping human civilization running even though no humans were there to see it. Commander Ryan Carter's former military base near the Galactic Rim told a different story. Unlike the civilian colonies, the military facility had been completely dismantled. Every weapon, every piece of equipment, every scrap of useful material had been taken. But what scared the search teams most was what they found in the intelligence archives. The humans had been gathering information about every council species for centuries. They knew which worlds had weak defenses. They knew which governments were unstable. They knew where every military base was located and how many ships each species could field in a war. They were preparing for conflict, Admiral Zixathara reported to the council. "While we thought they were grateful junior partners, they were getting ready to fight us if necessary." The search fleet found Captain Beth Walsh's exploration ship, the UES Discovery, drifting near a gas giant. The ship was intact but completely gutted. Every piece of advanced technology had been removed. The computer cores were gone. Even the wiring had been stripped out. In the ship's log, they found Beth's final entry. Phase 7 complete. All strategic assets relocated to secondary positions. Initiating communication blackout. See you on the other side. Dr. Nelshaw studied the log entry for hours. "Phase 7, she said to the Admiral. "That implies there were at least 6 previous phases. This evacuation was planned in detail for years." The most disturbing discovery came from the human research stations scattered throughout Council space. Each station had been studying a different aspect of alien biology, technology, or culture. The humans claimed they were doing basic research to better understand their galactic neighbors. But the evidence showed something else. The research was military in nature. Humans had been studying alien weaknesses, looking for ways to defeat or control other species. They had developed weapons specifically designed to work against different alien biologies. They were not just studying us, Dr. Nelshaw reported. They were learning how to fight us. The search fleet spent 8 months looking for any trace of human civilization. They checked every system that humans had ever visited. They followed every trade route that human ships had ever used. They searched planets that humans had never officially colonized, but might have used as secret bases. They found nothing. It was as if humanity had never existed. The only proof that humans had been real was the empty buildings they left behind and the collapsing infrastructure that had depended on their expertise. Admiral Zixathera sent her final report to the Council. With growing dread, the human evacuation was total and complete. They left no trails to follow, no clues about their destination. Based on the evidence, they had been preparing for this departure for at least 20 years, possibly longer. The humans were not the species we thought they were. While we saw them as useful but unremarkable junior partners, they were actually gathering intelligence on every aspect of our civilization. They understood our military capabilities, our economic systems, and our political structures better than we understood them ourselves. Most concerning of all, they left with technology that was far more advanced than anything they ever shared with the Council. We do not know what they are capable of, and we have no way to find out. The Admiral's final line sent a chill through the Council chambers. I recommend that we prepare for the possibility that humanity's departure was not a retreat. It may have been a strategic withdrawal before something much worse. Chancellor Vex-High read the report in his private office, surrounded by stacks of similar reports from other search teams. Every investigation had reached the same conclusion. Humanity had vanished completely, and they had taken capabilities with them that the Council never knew existed. For the first time in his long career, the Chancellor felt afraid. Not because of what the humans had done, but because of what they might do next. 1 year after humanity disappeared, the galaxy was falling apart. The first real crisis hit when the Skarn Empire launched their largest military campaign in 500 years. The Skarns were an aggressive species that had been kept in check by a careful balance of Council forces and human intelligence networks. President Alex Johnson had warned the Council about Skarn expansion plans for years, but the aliens had ignored his concerns. Now the Skarns were moving fast and hitting hard. Without human spy networks to provide advance warning, Council forces were always one step behind. Worlds that had been safe for centuries fell to Skarn invasion fleets within weeks. The Meridian Collective was the first to break. Ambassador Felmira stood before the Council emergency session with tears streaming down her blue face. Her people were peaceful traders who had relied on human protection for 200 years. 70% of our trade income is gone, she announced to the nearly empty Council chamber. Many species had stopped sending representatives because they could not afford the transportation costs without human shipping companies. Human cargo ships carried our goods to markets we cannot reach with our own vessels. Human translators helped us make deals with species whose languages we do not speak. Human banks processed our payments across different currency systems. Felmira's voice broke as she continued. Without them, we are isolated. Our economy has collapsed. Our people are starving. The Peaceful Species Alliance faced an even worse problem. Their colonies had no military defenses because humans had provided all their security for generations. When pirates began attacking Alliance worlds, there was no one to call for help. Captain Roy Bennett had commanded the human patrol fleet that protected 37 different worlds in the frontier regions. His ships had stopped countless pirate raids and criminal operations. After Roy left with the human evacuation, the criminals returned with a vengeance. The mining colony on Kepler 442b sent desperate messages to the Council as pirate fleets surrounded their planet. The colony had valuable rare metals but no weapons to defend themselves. They had always depended on human security forces to keep them safe. The Council tried to send help, but their own military ships were designed for major wars between species, not for fighting small, fast pirate vessels. The rescue fleet arrived 3 days too late. The pirates had taken everything valuable and killed most of the colonists. Similar attacks happened on dozens of worlds. The criminal organizations that humans had spent decades suppressing were returning to claim territory they had lost. Dr. Kate Sullivan's medical research had been keeping alien diseases under control across the galaxy. Her work on quantum plague, stellar fever, and biosynthetic infections had saved millions of lives. Her vaccines and treatments were the only things standing between peaceful species and deadly outbreaks. When Kate disappeared with the rest of humanity, her research went with her. The automated systems that produced her medicines began to fail. The quantum plague that she had controlled for 5 years broke out again on 14 different worlds. The Thermal Assembly sent frantic requests to the Council for medical aid. Their silicon-based biology made them especially vulnerable to quantum plague. Without Kate's treatments, the disease spread through their population like fire through dry grass. The Council's medical teams tried to recreate Kate's work, but human biology was too different from alien biology. Human doctors understood diseases in ways that alien doctors could not copy. The treatments that worked for humans often made alien patients sicker. Dr. Yelnas of the Scientific Collective led the effort to replace human medical knowledge. Her team worked around the clock for months, trying to understand how human treatments worked. They failed completely. Human medicine uses principles we do not understand, she reported to the Council. Their approach to disease treatment is fundamentally different from ours. We cannot replicate their methods. The economic collapse was getting worse every day. The consortium of free traders, which had been the backbone of galactic commerce, declared bankruptcy. Without human logistics expertise, they could not maintain their shipping schedules. Cargo that used to move smoothly across the galaxy was stuck in warehouses and loading docks. Unemployment on the core worlds reached 30% as industries that depended on interstellar trade shut down. Colonies that imported food from agricultural worlds began to starve as supply chains broke down. The Council tried to fill the gaps left by humanity, but they discovered something frightening. Humans had not just been doing jobs that other species could learn. They had been doing jobs that other species could not do. Human brains worked differently from alien brains. Humans could see patterns that other species missed. They could solve problems that stumped the galaxy's greatest minds. They could adapt to new situations faster than anyone else. The translation crisis reached a breaking point when the Zephyrian Collective and the Kronar Empire almost went to war over a misunderstood trade agreement. Without human linguists to bridge the communication gap, both species thought the other was planning an attack. Emergency diplomatic sessions were called, but the meetings collapsed into confusion as different species could not understand each other. Languages that humans had connected were becoming isolated again. The worst crisis came when the automated defense systems that protected the Council's home worlds began to fail. Humans had designed and maintained these systems for over a century. They were incredibly complex networks that required constant adjustment and updating. Without human technicians to keep them running, the defense grids started showing critical errors. Weapons platforms shut down unexpectedly. Sensor networks went offline. Communication between defensive units broke down. Chancellor Vexhai stood in the Council's war room, watching red warning lights blink across displays that showed the failing defense systems. Military advisors from a dozen species argued about how to fix problems they did not understand. The humans built systems that only humans could maintain, reported General Coxneal of the Defense Council. We cannot figure out how their technology works. Every time we try to fix one problem, we create 3 new ones. The Skarn Empire was watching these failures with great interest. Their spy networks reported that Council defenses were at their weakest point in centuries. Skarn war fleets began moving toward the core worlds, confident that they could succeed where previous invasions had failed. President Alex Johnson had once proposed a joint defense initiative that would have prepared the Council for exactly this kind of threat. He had wanted to share human military technology and coordinate defense strategies between species. The Council had voted down his proposal, saying that humans were too aggressive and too quick to assume military solutions to political problems. Now, the Council faced the possibility of total defeat by an enemy that humans had been warning them about for years. As Skarn ships appeared on the edge of Council space, Chancellor HFY realized the terrible truth. Humanity had not just been members of galactic civilization. They had been its protectors, its organizers, its problem solvers, and its bridge between different ways of thinking. Without them, the galaxy was not just weaker, it was defenseless. 5 years had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the Council chambers. The Great Hall, where hundreds of species once gathered, was mostly empty now. Only 37 species still sent representatives to Council meetings. The rest had either joined regional alliances or simply stopped participating in galactic politics altogether. Chancellor HFY sat alone in his office, looking at reports that told the same story over and over again. The galactic civilization that had taken thousands of years to build was collapsing in less than a decade. The Skarn Empire now controlled 40% of former Council space. Their expansion had been swift and brutal, exactly as President Alex Johnson had predicted it would be. The human defense plans that Alex had proposed could have stopped the Skarn advance easily. Those plans now sat in archived files that no one knew how to use. On his desk lay the latest casualty reports. The Caldris system had finally fallen to quantum plague after 3 years of fighting the disease. 12 billion silicon-based beings had died because no one could replicate Dr. Kate Sullivan's treatments. The cure existed somewhere in human medical databases, but the encryption was impossible to break. The economic numbers were even worse. Galactic trade had dropped to 20% of what it had been during the human era. Most species were focused on simple survival now. The complex web of interstellar commerce that had connected thousands of worlds was broken beyond repair. Soft chime announced an incoming message. Chancellor HFY looked at his communication screen and felt his 4 hearts skip a beat. The message header showed Earth as the origin point. After 5 years of silence, humanity was finally responding. The message was short and formal. To the former colleagues of the Galactic Council, humanity wishes you well in your future endeavors. We have established ourselves in regions beyond your current reach and have no interest in resuming diplomatic relations. We suggest you focus on rebuilding the systems you took for granted rather than seeking to re-establish contact with us. The stars are vast, and there is room for all to find their own path. Farewell. The Human Federation. Chancellor HFY read the message 3 times before the words fully sank in. The Human Federation. Not the Earth government or the Human Republic. A completely new political structure that implied humanity had grown far beyond what they had been when they left Council. Space Dr. Nelshaw had spent 5 years studying the data that humans left behind in their abandoned facilities. Her final report lay on the Chancellor's desk next to the human message. Her conclusions were disturbing. We never understood what humanity was, she had written. We treated them as a young species that needed our guidance and protection, but the evidence shows that they were already more advanced than most Council species when they first joined us 300 years ago. They shared only the most basic versions of their technology with us. Their true capabilities were always hidden. The medical advances, the military systems, the economic models that they used to hold our civilization together were primitive, compared to what they kept for themselves. We were not teaching them our ways. They were managing us. The truth was painful, but undeniable. Humans had not been junior partners in galactic civilization. They had been its secret leaders, quietly solving problems and preventing disasters while allowing other species to believe they were in charge. Ambassador Kreltos of the Vorthan Republic had spent 2 years trying to rebuild the defense networks that humans had once maintained. His people were proud engineers who had built some of the most impressive structures in the galaxy, but they could not figure out how human technology worked. Human engineering is not just different from ours, Kreltos had reported. It is based on principles we do not understand. They think about problems in ways that our minds cannot follow. The Vortans had always considered themselves superior to humans in scientific matters. They had voted against human research proposals for decades, claiming that human methods were too crude and too simple. Now Vorthan colonies were starving because they could not maintain the food distribution systems that humans had designed. The systems were not broken. They were just too complex for non-human minds to operate effectively. Economic advisor Threx Null had been replaced after his reports about the galactic economic collapse became too depressing for the council to hear. His replacement, a brilliant Altarian mathematician named Zexmol, had reached the same conclusions. The human economic model was not just efficient, Zexmol wrote. It was the only model that could work with so many different species involved. They understood how to balance the needs of silicon-based traders with carbon-based manufacturers, how to manage currency exchanges between energy beings and physical matter civilizations. Without humans to run the economic systems, we are reduced to simple barter trade between neighboring worlds. The galactic economy has basically returned to pre-space flight levels. The medical crisis had stabilized, but only because most of the vulnerable populations were already dead. The species that survived the plague outbreaks were the ones with strong natural immunity. The weaker species that had depended on human medical support were simply gone. Dr. Yelnus had become something of an expert on human medicine through her failed attempts to replicate it. Her research had led to a sobering conclusion about human intelligence. Humans process information differently than any other known species, she wrote. Their brains form connections that allow them to see relationships between seemingly unrelated concepts. This ability made them natural problem solvers and system integrators. They could understand how different alien biologies, technologies, and cultures could work together in ways that the individual species could not see for themselves. The defense situation had stabilized only because there was almost nothing left to defend. The Skarn Empire had taken everything they wanted from former Council space. The remaining species had formed small defensive alliances that barely managed to protect their core worlds. General Coxneal had died defending the thermal assembly homeworld from Skarn invasion. His final report had been brutally honest about the military situation. Human defensive strategies were based on rapid response and preventive action, he wrote. They stopped problems before they became crises. Without their early warning systems and quick reaction forces, we can only respond to attacks after they have already succeeded. We are always too late, too slow, and too poorly coordinated to mount effective resistance. Chancellor HFY stood up from his desk and walked to the great window that looked out over the council chambers. The building felt hollow and empty now. Most of the offices were closed. The translation departments had been shut down. The great library where human researchers had once studied alien cultures was dark and silent. He thought about Jake Morrison's final words. We were never members. We were workers. The Chancellor finally understood what Jake had meant. Membership implied equality, mutual benefit, and shared decision-making. But humans had never been treated as equals by the Council. They had been treated as useful subordinates, who could handle the jobs that other species found too difficult or too boring. When the workers left, the work stopped getting done. The galaxy had not just lost a member species, it had lost the species that made galactic civilization possible. Without humans to connect different ways of thinking, to solve complex problems, and to maintain systems that no one else understood, the great alliance of worlds had simply fallen apart. As Chancellor HFY looked out at the empty chamber where representatives once debated the future of galactic civilization, he realized that the future had already been decided. It had been decided the day humanity walked away. The stars were still vast, as the human message had said. There was still room for all species to find their own path, but some paths led forward, and some paths led back to the Dark Ages. Without humanity, the galaxy was walking backward into the darkness, one failed system at a time.